They say a man only realizes how fragile his happiness is when it's too late. Maybe that was true for me. I had what I thought was a good life. Stable. Predictable. Comfortable. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 8 years, and we had a steady rhythm, a routine that felt safe. We weren't the kind of couple that threw wild anniversary parties or posted overly affectionate photos online, but we were solid. Or at least, I thought we were. We met in college. She was studying psychology, I was working on my business degree. We were young, reckless, and stupidly in love. She had this infectious energy, the kind that made you want to be around her. Over the years, that spark softened into something steadier, quieter, but I never doubted its existence. We built a life together, a nice house in the suburbs, weekend barbecues with friends, the occasional getaway to somewhere warm when work allowed. It wasn't perfect, of course. No marriage is. Lately, she had seemed distracted. I told myself it was work stress. She was a therapist and had been taking on more difficult clients. She came home exhausted, barely engaging in conversation. Our once passionate nights had turned into quick pecks on the cheek and a routine "good night, babe." I ignored it. Relationships ebb and flow, right? Then, little things started adding up. One night, she came home late from what she said was a team dinner. Nothing unusual, except when I casually asked where they ate, she hesitated. That new place, Ember. I frowned. I had suggested going there a few weeks ago, and she had said she wasn't interested. Oh? How was it? She shrugged. Busy. Overpriced. I let it go, but something about her response felt rehearsed. A few days later, I noticed she had a new perfume. Stronger, heavier. Something she had never worn around me. You like it? She asked, twirling in front of the mirror. Yeah, I lied. I started paying more attention. Her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now always face down. Her texts were suddenly locked with a passcode. She had a new gym routine, morning runs that she claimed helped her clear her mind. But I never saw any workout clothes in the laundry. Then, the moment that really made my stomach drop. I had fallen asleep on the couch one night while she was in the shower. The sound of her phone vibrating woke me. Half asleep, I glanced over. A name flashed on the screen. D. No last name. Just a letter. And beneath it, a message preview. Miss you. Can't stop thinking about last night. A wave of ice-cold panic washed over me. My throat tightened, and my heart slammed against my ribs. Emily stepped out of the bathroom, towel-drying her hair, humming to herself. She saw me looking at her phone and, for the briefest second, her face tensed. Everything okay? She asked, her voice too casual. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. Yeah. Just got a notification on my phone too. She nodded, but I noticed how quickly she picked up her phone, pressing the screen before I could see anything else. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. Something was very, very wrong. I should have confronted her that night. I should have held up her phone, read the message out loud, and watched her reaction. Maybe she would have lied. Maybe she would have laughed it off. Or maybe, just maybe, she would have broken down right then and there and told me the truth. But I didn't. Instead, I let it fester. The message burned into my brain, playing on repeat every time I closed my eyes. Miss you. Can't stop thinking about last night. I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of Emily's breathing beside me. My wife, my Emily, was sleeping peacefully while my mind was spinning, trying to find a logical explanation. Who the hell was Dee? Was I overthinking this? Maybe it was innocent. Maybe she had an old friend who got too sentimental after a couple of drinks. Maybe I was turning into one of those paranoid, insecure husbands who looked for signs that weren't there. But my gut told me otherwise. So I did what any rational man would do in my situation. I started watching. The first clue. The next morning, I acted normal, or at least, I tried. I kissed Emily goodbye before she left for work, just like always. But as she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my laptop and logged into our phone carrier account. Emily didn't know I had the login information. We had a shared plan, and a couple of years ago, she had set up paperless billing. I never really had a reason to check it before. Until now. I clicked through to the call log, scanning for any unfamiliar numbers. There were a lot of them: clients, work contacts, random spam numbers. But one stood out. A number with no name attached to it. And it appeared a lot. Over the past month, Emily had called this number at least 30 times, sometimes multiple times a day. Most of the calls were brief, 3, maybe 5 minutes. But others? Some lasted nearly an hour. A deep, sick feeling settled in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. It rang. Once. Twice. Then straight to voicemail. No name. No greeting. Just a generic robotic voice: "The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please leave a message." I hung up. Whoever this was, they didn't want to be identified. The second clue. That evening, I decided to test her. We had dinner together, nothing fancy, just takeout from a nearby sushi place. Emily seemed relaxed, even happy. She told me about her day, about some difficult clients she had at work, and how she might need to start taking sessions outside of normal hours. That was new. So, I said casually, "Any plans for this weekend?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Actually, yeah. I was thinking of having a girls' night with Lauren and Sophie." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh yeah? Where?" "Just dinner, maybe drinks after." She took a sip of her wine. "I'm not sure yet. We haven't decided." Another lie. Emily was a planner. She didn't do spontaneous. If she was going out, she'd have a full itinerary, complete with backup options in case the first place was too crowded. She was testing me now, seeing if I would ask more questions, if I would press her for details. I didn't. I just nodded, took a bite of my sushi, and pretended I wasn't dying inside. The third clue. The following morning, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I followed my wife. She left the house at 7:30 a.m. sharp, just like always. I waited 5 minutes, then got into my car and tailed her. She drove to work. Good. Normal. Expected. I parked a block away, watching as she walked inside. Then I waited. Hours passed. I felt ridiculous. Maybe I really was losing my mind. Then, at exactly 12:17 p.m., she left the building. Alone. Emily wasn't the type to take lunch breaks. She usually ate at her desk, answering emails between bites of salad. But today, she was getting in her car. I started my engine and followed her at a distance. She drove across town, past the busy lunch spots, past the places we usually ate together. She pulled into the parking lot of a small boutique hotel. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I watched as she parked and checked her phone. A few seconds later, she got out and walked toward the entrance. Then, a man stepped out to meet her. Tall. Dark-haired. Well-dressed. Maybe early 40s. I felt my stomach turn as I watched him kiss her on the cheek. Emily smiled. They disappeared inside together. The breaking point. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity. My mind raced. This was it. The confirmation. The moment of truth. I could still convince myself that this was all some horrible misunderstanding. Maybe she was meeting a client. Maybe it was a business lunch. But deep down, I already knew. I needed proof. So I waited. 40 minutes passed. An hour. An hour and a half. Then, finally, at 1:56 p.m., they emerged. Emily was laughing. Laughing. The man said something, and she playfully swatted his arm. Then, just as they reached her car, she turned to him and kissed him. Not on the cheek this time. A real kiss. My heart stopped. I wanted to charge over, to grab her, to scream at both of them. But instead, I just sat there. Frozen. Emily got into her car and drove away, completely unaware that I had seen everything. I watched the man walk back into the hotel like it was nothing. Like he hadn't just shattered my world. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. My wife was cheating on me. And she thought she was getting away with it. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling. I had my proof. Now, it was time to decide what to do with it. I drove home in silence, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My mind was a hurricane of thoughts, flashes of Emily's laughter, the way she touched his arm, the way she kissed him. She kissed him. Not a friendly peck. Not an innocent gesture. A real kiss. A kiss that shattered everything I thought we had. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the world felt different. The house, our house, felt foreign, like a place I no longer belonged. I sat there, staring at the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what was worse, the betrayal itself or the fact that she had looked me in the eyes this morning, kissed me goodbye, and walked straight into another man's arms a few hours later. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was lying to my face. I could feel the rage building inside me, but I swallowed it down. If I lost control now, I wouldn't get what I needed. I needed the truth. And I needed to hear it from her. The waiting game. Emily wouldn't be home for a few more hours. That gave me time. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, my mind replaying everything I had seen. The hotel. The way she smiled at him. The way she kissed him. I grabbed a notepad from the counter and started writing down questions. Who is he? How long has this been going on? Do you love him? Was I ever enough? How many times have you lied to my face? The pen dug into the paper, my handwriting getting sloppier with every question. I didn't even realize I was gripping the pen so hard until I heard the snap, the plastic casing cracking in my hand. I let out a slow breath, tossing it aside. I needed to stay calm. When she walked through that door, I needed to be in control. She comes home. At 6:43 p.m., I heard the garage door open. My pulse spiked. I stayed in my seat, my hands folded on the table, watching as the door from the garage swung open. Emily walked in, holding a grocery bag in one hand and her purse in the other. She looked normal. Completely normal. Like she hadn't spent the afternoon betraying me. She smiled when she saw me. Hey, babe. Babe. I clenched my jaw. She walked over, setting the grocery bag down, and leaned in to kiss me. I pulled back. Her lips barely brushed my cheek before she froze, her eyes flicking to mine. What's wrong? I stared at her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her phone and throw it across the room. I wanted to tell her exactly what I had seen. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Where were you today?" It was a simple question. A test. Emily blinked, then smiled. Work. Why? Lie. I nodded slowly, forcing my voice to stay even. And after work? She hesitated. A small pause, barely noticeable, but I noticed. I went to lunch with Sophie, she said. Lie. I tilted my head. Oh yeah? Where'd you go? She shifted on her feet. That little cafe near the office. The one with the outdoor seating. Lie. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face blank. Emily, I said quietly. She swallowed. Yeah? I met her gaze. Try again. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? I let the silence stretch between us. Let the weight of it sink in. Then, I said the words that made the color drain from her face. I saw you. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape. Saw me? What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, opened my gallery, and turned the screen toward her. There she was, walking into that hotel with him. I watched her face carefully. The shock. The panic. The way her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. For a split second, I saw something else too. Guilt. But then, just as quickly, she covered it up. She let out a forced laugh, shaking her head. Oh my God, are you following me now? Deflection. I didn't blink. Answer the question. Her fingers clenched around the grocery bag. This is insane, Steve. Answer the question. Her chest rose and fell in sharp breaths. It's not what it looks like. I slammed my fist on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen. Don't you dare insult me with that bullshit. She flinched. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, finally, she exhaled. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. Her hands trembled as she ran them through her hair. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke. His name is Daniel. The name made me sick. How long? I asked. She hesitated. A few months. Lie. How long? She closed her eyes. Almost a year. My stomach twisted. Almost a year. Almost a fucking year. I had been sleeping next to her, loving her, trusting her, for almost a year while she was sneaking off to be with him. I gripped the edge of the table to stop myself from flipping it over. Are you in love with him? She didn't answer. The silence said everything. I laughed bitterly. Wow. She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. Steve, I held up a hand. Don't. Just, don't. I stood up, shoving my chair back. My entire body felt numb. She stared up at me, her face streaked with tears. I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a cold laugh. You never wanted to hurt me? Are you serious? Her lip trembled. I just got lost. I didn't mean for it to happen. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. You didn't mean for it to happen? So what, you just tripped and landed in a hotel room with him. Steve, please. Don't. I turned back, my voice dangerously low. Don't beg. Don't make excuses. You made your choice. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Do you hate me? I stared at her for a long time. Finally, I said, no. And that was the worst part. Because I wanted to hate her. But all I felt was this deep, aching emptiness. She wiped her face, sniffling. Can we fix this? I let the question hang in the air. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. Emily cried herself to sleep in the guest room, but I lay awake in our bed, my bed now, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in that hotel parking lot. Saw her kiss him. Almost a year. For nearly 12 months, she had been lying to my face, sneaking around, fucking another man while coming home to me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Anger came in waves. It wasn't the kind that burned hot and fast. No, this was worse. Colder. Sharper. This was the kind of anger that didn't fade. I heard Emily shifting in the guest room, muffled whimpers coming through the walls. I used to feel something when she cried, an instinct to comfort her, hold her, tell her it would be okay. But tonight? I felt nothing. The only thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't letting this go easily. Emily had taken something from me. Now it was my turn. The first step. By morning, my decision was made. I got out of bed, showered, shaved, and got dressed. Not in my usual t-shirt and jeans, but in a crisp button-down and slacks. A power move, even if I was the only one who knew it. Emily was in the kitchen when I walked in, her face pale and puffy from crying. She looked at me, hopeful, like maybe I'd softened overnight. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed my car keys and walked out the door. I had work to do. Gathering the pieces. The first stop was a lawyer. I walked into the firm of Grayson and Hart and sat down with a divorce attorney named Lisa Grayson. She was professional, no nonsense, and, more importantly, she didn't bullshit me. "Your wife's been unfaithful," she said, scanning the photos and evidence I had gathered. "That works in your favor, depending on how we play this." I nodded. "I want options." Lisa leaned back in her chair. "Do you want to destroy her, or just walk away clean?" I hadn't decided yet. But it felt good knowing I had the power. The surveillance. I wasn't done gathering evidence. Not yet. I needed everything. So I made a stop at a little place downtown, a private investigator's office. His name was Ernie Matson, and he looked like every washed-up detective you'd see in an old crime movie. "Cheating wife?" he asked when I walked in. I nodded. "Standard or full?" I raised an eyebrow. "What's the difference?" "Standard gets you texts, calls, and location tracking. Full gets you videos, pictures, and live updates." I didn't hesitate. "Full." Emily wanted secrets? Fine. But I'd make sure I had every single one of hers before this was over. The calm before the storm. That evening, I went home as if nothing had happened. Emily was waiting for me, sitting on the couch with her hands folded in her lap. She looked like she had spent the whole day preparing for this moment. "Steve," she said, voice shaky. "Can we talk?" I sat down across from her, calm. "Go ahead." She swallowed hard. I need you to know how sorry I am. I wasn't thinking. I got caught up in something I didn't mean to." "Don't," I interrupted. She flinched. "What?" "Don't sit there and lie to me again. You didn't get caught up in something. This wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is an accident. But you made a choice. Over and over again." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't love him," she whispered. I let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, well, in that case, let's forget the whole thing." She shook her head, biting her lip. "I love you. I always have." I stared at her. "Then why did you do it?" Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have an answer. She never did. The power shift. The next morning, the PI called me. "She's still in contact with him," Ernie said. "Texts, calls, the works." I expected that. "She's meeting him again," he continued. "Tomorrow." That was interesting. Emily had cried, begged, told me she was sorry, and yet, not even 48 hours later, she was planning to see him again. I clenched my jaw. That settled it. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to make her regret everything. The setup. Step 1 was simple. I pretended everything was fine. I acted like I was thinking things over, like I was considering working things out. Emily latched onto that. She made me breakfast. Asked about my day. Tried to initiate sex, which I declined with a polite smile. She thought she was winning me back. She had no idea I was watching her every move. The sting. The next evening, I followed her. She told me she was going to a friend's house, but I already knew where she was going. I parked a block away and watched as she pulled into the parking lot of the same boutique hotel. Again. Fury simmered beneath my skin. But I waited. 15 minutes later, Daniel arrived. I snapped pictures of them kissing, holding hands, walking inside together. Then, I sent the pictures to her parents, her sister, and a few close friends. And finally, I sent them to her. The moment of truth. 30 minutes later, Emily burst through the front door. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she held up her phone. "What the fuck did you do?" she shrieked. I leaned back in my chair, calm. "Oh, I thought you didn't love him. Thought you were sorry. Guess you had a change of heart." Her lip trembled. You sent them to my family?" I smirked. "And your boss?" She paled. I stood up, walking toward her slowly. "Did you really think I was just going to roll over and let you humiliate me?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I grabbed my phone and pulled up an email. "Oh, and one more thing, your boss? Yeah, he's very interested in knowing that one of his employees has been fucking a married woman on company time." Her eyes went wide. "Steve, please, don't." I hit send. The email shot off. And just like that, Emily's entire world crumbled. The end of us. The divorce papers were signed within a month. She lost her job. Her family barely spoke to her. And as for Daniel? He dumped her the second things got complicated. As for me? I walked away clean. No regrets. No looking back. Just freedom. And the knowledge that she would never, ever forget what she did to me. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. The ink had dried, the assets had been divided, and Emily was officially nothing more than a bad memory. I should have felt free. I should have felt relieved. But the truth was, closure didn't come with a signature on paper. Not yet. I knew at the moment I saw her name pop up on my phone. "Emily, can we talk? One last time?" I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether I should respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave her hanging the way she had left me hanging for almost a year while she snuck around with him. But the other part of me? The part that had spent so many years loving her, building a life with her, trusting her? That part wanted an ending. A real one. So I sent a reply. Me, one conversation. That's it. She answered immediately. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. The cafe on Hawthorne. The same cafe where we used to meet for breakfast every Sunday. Where we had whispered about dreams, about growing old together. It felt like a cruel joke. But I agreed. Because I needed to see. I needed to know if there was anything left between us. The meeting. The next evening, I walked into the cafe 5 minutes early. It looked exactly the same: the soft lighting, the hum of quiet conversations, the smell of coffee and freshly baked pastries. The only thing that had changed was me. I wasn't the man I had been the last time I sat here with Emily. That man had been naive, trusting. That man had believed in forever. Now, I believed in reality. Emily was already there, sitting at our usual table by the window. When she saw me, she stood quickly, smoothing down the fabric of her sweater. She looked different, tired, thinner. Her eyes had lost that confident glow she always carried. Good. She didn't deserve to look untouched by this. "Steve." She spoke my name like it was something delicate, something that still mattered. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Emily." A long silence stretched between us. The kind of silence filled with things left unsaid. She cleared her throat, fiddling with the rim of her coffee cup. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I shrugged. Neither was I. Her lips pressed together. I needed to see you. I needed to explain." I leaned back in my chair. "Explain what, exactly?" Her eyes darted away, guilt flashing across her face. "Everything. I let out a slow, humorless laugh. Everything? Emily, the time for explanations was before you spent almost a year sneaking off to hotels with another man. Not now. Her shoulders slumped. I know. I know that. But I need you to understand that I never. I held up a hand. Let me stop you right there. Her mouth closed. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. I don't need you to tell me you never meant to hurt me. I don't need to hear about how you were lost, or confused, or any of the usual excuses people make when they ruin everything they claim to love. Tears welled up in her eyes. Steve. No, I cut her off. You don't get to cry. Not here. Not with me. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly to keep the tears from falling. I studied her for a moment, then leaned forward. You know what I do want, Emily? I want to know why. Why you did it. Why you kept lying, even after I gave you a chance to come clean. She let out a shaky breath. She hesitated. I don't know. I let out a bitter chuckle. That's bullshit. She flinched. I ran a hand through my hair, my patience unraveling. You knew, Emily. You knew exactly what you were doing every time you walked into that hotel, every time you kissed him, every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. I loved you, Steve. I still do. I barked out a laugh. That's rich. She looked up at me, desperate. I swear, I never wanted to lose you. You lost me the second you let him touch you, I said coldly. Her breath hitched. I wasn't thinking. I tilted my head. That's the thing, though. You were. You had to plan your lies. Had to cover your tracks. That takes thought. Her hands trembled. I was unhappy. I scoffed. Then you should have told me. You should have left. Instead, you stayed and made me into a fool. She sniffled, wiping her face. I hated myself every time I came home to you. I clenched my jaw. But not enough to stop. Her silence was the only answer I needed. I sat back, my chest hollow. Did you ever think about what it would do to me? Emily's bottom lip quivered. Every day. I shook my head. Then why? Her voice cracked. Because I was selfish. For the first time that night, she told the truth. And it didn't change a damn thing. The end of us. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders relaxing. That's all I needed to hear. Emily looked at me, something close to panic in her eyes. Steve, please. Can we at least be? No. She froze. I stood, pushing my chair back. You don't get to ask for friendship. You don't get to ask for anything from me. We're done, Emily. Really, truly done. She swallowed. Will I ever see you again? I thought about it. About the years we had spent together. About the life I thought we had built. Then, I shook my head. No. Her face crumpled. I didn't stay to watch her break down. I turned, walked out of that cafe, and stepped into the cool night air. For the first time since this nightmare began, I took a deep breath. And it didn't hurt anymore. I thought walking out of that cafe would be the final step. That after looking Emily in the eye, after hearing her excuses, after telling her there was nothing left between us, I'd feel free. But life doesn't work like that. You don't just snap your fingers and stop loving someone. You don't erase years of memories in one dramatic exit. The truth is, betrayal doesn't end with a signed divorce paper. It lingers. It follows you home at night, crawls into bed with you, whispers in your ear when you least expect it. And even when you think you're done with it, it isn't done with you. The empty house. The silence was the worst part. After Emily moved out, the house felt hollow, like something had been ripped out of it. Every room echoed with what used to be. The kitchen where we used to drink coffee together in the mornings. The living room where she curled up next to me on the couch. The bedroom, God, the bedroom. I couldn't sleep in that bed anymore. I tried. But every time I lay down, I imagined her lying there with him. So I started sleeping on the couch. At first, I told myself it was temporary. That I'd move back to the bedroom once the pain faded. But weeks passed, and I never did. Because the truth was, I didn't want to sleep in that bed ever again. It wasn't mine anymore. Filling the void. I threw myself into work. Late nights at the office, extra projects, anything to keep my mind occupied. When that wasn't enough, I hit the gym hard. Running, lifting, pushing myself to the point of exhaustion. Because if I was too tired to think, then I was too tired to remember. It helped. For a while. But then came the nights. And nothing could save me from those. Running into the past. The first time I saw Emily after the cafe, I was at the grocery store. I had gone 2 months without seeing her. 2 months of silence. Then suddenly, there she was. Standing in the produce aisle, looking at oranges. She hadn't seen me yet. And for a brief moment, I considered turning around and walking out. But something made me stop. I studied her, looking for signs of change. She looked different. Thinner. More tired. Like she hadn't been sleeping much either. And then, as if sensing my stare, she turned. Our eyes met. For the first time in 2 months, we were face to face again. Emily's lips parted slightly, her grip tightening on the shopping cart. Steve. I didn't move. I just watched her. She took a hesitant step forward. How have you been? I almost laughed at the question. How had I been? Fucking wrecked, that's how. But instead of saying that, I just nodded. I'm fine. She studied me, like she was trying to decide if I was lying. I didn't care what she saw. She swallowed hard. I cut her off. I have nothing to say to you, Emily. She winced, like I had slapped her. Good. She deserved it. I turned and walked away without another word. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had one. A new face in my life. I wasn't looking to date. The idea of trusting someone again felt impossible. But life has a way of throwing things at you when you least expect it. Her name was Rachel. She worked in my office, new hire, smart, funny. The kind of woman who lit up a room just by walking into it. She started talking to me at lunch one day, asking about a project we were working on. One conversation turned into 2. Then 3. Then suddenly, we were having lunch together every day. I told myself it was nothing. Just co-workers. Just friends. But then one night, she asked me out for drinks. And I said yes. Letting someone in. I told Rachel everything on our second date. I don't know why. Maybe because I was tired of hiding it. Maybe because, for the first time, I felt like someone actually cared. She listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't try to offer meaningless advice. She just listened. And when I finished, she said something I didn't expect. I don't think you're over her. I tensed. I am. She tilted her head. Then why are you still letting her live in your head? I had no answer. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Emily was gone, but she still had a hold on me. And I hated that. Facing the truth. That night, I went home and did something I had been avoiding for months. I walked into the bedroom. The sheets were still the same ones Emily had picked out. The pillows still smelled faintly like her. It felt tainted. So I did the only thing I could. I stripped the bed bare, dragged the mattress out of the house, and threw the whole damn thing onto the curb. The next day, I bought a new bed. Fresh sheets. New pillows. It was a small thing. But as I lay down that night, in a bed that was mine and mine alone, I realized something. For the first time since she left, I felt like this house belonged to me again. The final message. 2 weeks later, Emily texted me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry again. For everything. I hope you're doing okay. I stared at the message for a long time. Then, finally, I replied. I am. And I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. And that was it. I deleted her number. And this time I meant it when I said goodbye. A new beginning. Rachel and I kept seeing each other. Slowly, carefully. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Not for what I lost, but for what was still ahead. Because in the end, Emily's betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new one.